Good afternoon. My name is Craig Dodson. I am going to present my Vision Walk project as part of EDSE 6223, Supervision and Educational Leadership, taught by Dr. Judy Jenkins at Henderson State University. In the first step, my Vision Walk, I had to establish an overall school vision. I had been in the state of Arkansas for less than a week, actually only about 3 days at the time this vision walk was completed, and the limits of knowledge of the community that I am currently residing in was the people at my professional development table. So I engaged them to do the vision walk with me, and they were very supportive. You can see the list of the team members that were present. To build the vision. I had done some homework on how to build the vision, and so each teacher, each team member, there were some directors there as well, gave statements as to what a perfect world would look like if our school was perfect. And once all the statements were written, we listed the nouns as causes, the verbs as actions, and what happened when those two came together as impacts. So students interacting produce or ensure that learning occurs. These causes, actions, and impacts. We listed those, as you can see, on a noteboard and used those to come up with our favorites and what we think would best serve as a vision statement and form a group statement from it. What we collectively came up with was the AHS family will collaborate to build a community of proactive citizens. We love the idea of family. We love the idea of collaboration, that this is not one teacher and then the next teacher, that we all collaborate to help our children excel. The idea of community is a large and important facet of life in Texarkana. And productive citizens, we're a high school. Our children and students are going to leave us and go straight into society, and we need them to graduate ready to be productive and successful. Implementation and stewardship. The school does not currently have a PLC program. When I asked about this in our discussion, the table agreed this would be a good idea, but is not something the school presently engages in. Second, utilize a magnet coordinator to bring more local industries and businesses into the school. The school recently got a magnet grant and has employed an administrator into the role of magnet coordinator. His job is to implement the magnet grant, but part of that is engaging local industries and businesses in the community. So getting more local participation would help our students get jobs as they leave the school and be better prepared for those jobs when they do. Finally, focus on improving vocational education offerings. Currently, the offerings are few. There's just not a lot of opportunity there, and expanding opportunities for certifications and job training would be a focus. Stewardship. Once the PLCs are created, we would maintain the PLCs throughout the school and receive regular reports. So the PLCs would take root and start to result in improvements. We monitor the CTE credentialing, expand offerings over a 3-year period. Once the CTE program is kicked into gear, keeping a close eye on how many students are getting credentials and continue to try to grow that number by expanding offerings and improving services in order to have a strong CTE program within a 3-year period. And finally, work through PBIS, through positive behavior interventions and supports, to decrease office referrals. The office referral data is heavily slanted toward African American children, low-income students, and special needs. Of the 16 out-of-school referrals, out-of-school suspensions for last year, 10 of them were special education students. These inordinately high numbers could be decreased with effective implementation of positive behavior interventions and supports. In conducting a needs assessment, I looked at the school report cards on the state website and the data produced by ESSA. I got to this data and waded through it with the help of the counseling department here at the school. AHS will improve the performance of its low-income students by 5 points by the end of the 2019-2020 school year. This is on the ESSA scoring system. In order to do this, we will form a working committee made up of counseling, mental health, administration, and faculty to isolate the causation of the scores, which are below state average. All of AHS's ESSA scores are solidly on the state average. Some are slightly below, some are slightly above. The low-income students are the lowest of the scores for the school. Newly formed PLCs will work to adapt curriculum and instruction. The principal will monitor the progress of the students identified as low income on all benchmark tests. So in addition to the PLCs working to raise the scores, the administration will monitor each benchmark to see if immediate improvement needs to be made. The committee will meet after each benchmark to make further recommendations or modifications to try to get those low income numbers up. Needs assessment data continued. AHS will improve the performance of its students with disabilities by 5 points. The alternate assessment program was largely unsuccessful in the school last year. Special ed numbers were very low, so staff will be retrained on the alternate assessment program. The special education director will monitor benchmark progress, reporting to the principal. Special education students in inclusive settings will meet daily with a resource teacher or case manager to ensure adequate preparation. And finally, special education director will examine current staffing levels and make recommendations for improvement. Staffing levels for special ed are just a little bit low, and some of the special ed teachers are underqualified. The department is also very separate of the school, which creates a little bit of a communication gap between special ed and the school. And so focus being placed on these numbers by the school administration will help bring the special ed numbers up this school year. Finally, by 1 June 2020, AHS will have established PLCs in each department with the primary task of moving AHS from a C to a B in ESSA rating prior to 1 June 2021. Raising up a letter grade may take a full year. In year one, PLCs will consist of professional developments, learning how to communicate, learning how to function as a team, begin goal setting and setting benchmarks for yourselves as a team, or the teams themselves, focusing on how to improve the curriculum and learn the process of cooperative planning. So by the end of that first year, the PLCs should be off to a good start, so that in year two, they will implement the results of year one and continue the improvement process using that team approach, which should result in considerable departmental improvements. The school improvement meeting, there were 4 primary goals listed. This is the first goal as written: increase student achievement. The SMART goal would be by the end of the 2020 school year, AHS will raise the ESSA school index for 5 of the 6 subgroups by a minimum of 5 points. Now this one, as written, I felt the need to have 2 separate SMART goals based on the data that I was able to find on this. The goal as written was higher and increased retention of highly effective staff. One of the pieces of data that I found stated that the teachers here with emergency and provisional credentials was 16.1%. The state average, according to the website, is 1.8%. So that SMART goal was no later than 1 August 2020. AHS will lower the percentage teaching with emergency provisional credentials by 10% from the current 16.1% to 6.1%, working towards zero, but at least the state average of 1.8. That didn't really address retention or professional development very well. But it was a number that really kind of jumped off the page, so it needed to be directly addressed. So in order to address retention, I wrote a second SMART goal. By 1 August 2020, AHS will improve retention by 20% by instituting PLCs and PBIS with training and professional development for each area over the course of the school year. Once you initiate collaboration and communication and teach that to be done in a positive and impactful way, retention will improve. As you will see later on in the presentation, in the climate survey, the primary complaint was that teachers don't really communicate with each other well in the building. So retention begins with relationships, and happy employees tend to stay. So improving interdepartmental collaboration as well as a positive outlook within the building will improve relationships and improve retention. The culture survey has strengths. Teachers and staff discuss instructional strategies and curriculum issues. 84.7% scored 4 or 5. So the teachers are collaborating instructionally quite well. The school staff is empowered to make instructional decisions rather than waiting for supervisors to tell them what to do. 50% scored a 4 or 5. Now I should say 1 was strongly disagree, 5 was strongly agree, 3 was sometimes. So that's the way the scale ran. The planning and organizational time allotted to teachers and the staff is used to plan as collective units, teams, rather than as separate individuals. 72.2% agreed with this. So there are some good strengths there as far as academic planning, instruction, and collaboration. There's some good things going on. Now, conversely, in the areas of need, teachers and staff work together to develop the school schedule. 53.7, over half of the respondents scored a 1 or 2. Over 40% scored a 1. The student behavior code is a result of collaboration and consensus. 57.4%, 1 or 2. Those two tell me that the administration in prior years has been quite top-down. While there may be good academic collaboration going on, the staff has not been consulted, and there hasn't been a whole lot of consensus building between the administration and the staff. Teachers and staff visit, talk, meet outside of school to enjoy each other's company. Almost 70% scored 1 or 2. That there is not a strong bond between the teachers, which takes me back to the need for PLCs and PBIS within the school to help pull teachers together. Creating events for teachers through PLCs and things like that will improve some of those retention issues that were listed earlier. The classroom observations. Improved checks for understanding and informal assessment. In several of the lessons that I observed, there were lots of information going on without stopping to see if the students were with you or not. So you have to pause frequently to make sure the students are with you and understand the concept. You can't assume that you were understood when you give long lists of instructions or large quantities of information. Which brings me to the second one, which is chunk information in a way that it can be absorbed by the student. Too much information or too many directions result in confusion and lesson difficulty. In fact, in one of my observations, a teacher openly stated that the slideshow he was using was someone else's, and he lectured in the dark for the entire lesson without stopping at all to check and see if any student was paying attention. You have to slow that down and chunk it and make sure the students are sticking along with you. Finally, you maintain cultural sensitivity, particularly when giving vocabulary. English learners and students with disability and others may have difficulty with complex concepts and directions. There were several occasions where directions were given, again, in kind of a list, and there was clear student confusion following the directions because the directions weren't slow enough or weren't deliberate enough to make sure that all of the children understood what was expected of them. The possibility may exist with some of that to give a few directions and begin the project, then give the next few steps, or something like that to make sure that the children and the students are with you while you're going through the exercise. Modeling supervision. These are goals that were set forth previously, similarly in my principal's professional growth plan. Modeling supervision, I think, is essential, particularly in the early phases of becoming a principal. In order to model supervision, within the first week, I will review the teacher growth plans in order to establish a baseline of expectations for each teacher. I will begin meeting with each teacher as soon as they report, utilizing baseline from the first one to establish 2 to 5 clear growth expectations that will be directly observable during walkthroughs. Everybody can grow, everybody can get better. I would like to see every teacher come up with 1 or 2 things, or 3 things, 4 things that I can see when I do a walkthrough in their classroom. I will do an immediate data dive within the first week of employment, paying particular attention to special education and minority subgroup test scores, establishing growth goals for each department using the results. As a career special educator, I know that the special ed scores and the minority performance are the first place to go to, because in almost every school I've been, it's been a problem. It is a problem that can be overcome with the right organization and structure in the departments. But it is a problem that has to be directly addressed and paid attention to on a frequent basis. Finally, train PBIS beginning in the first year if not already present. Communicate early and often with the department heads, evaluating curriculum and pedagogy through observation for PBIS principals. I feel really strongly about the implementation of PBIS in school systems. I feel having a career in residential settings and special education, the value of positive interaction and positive relationships can't be understated. I spent many years working with at-risk children and kids that were 2 and 3 years behind in school, and saw many of them graduate successfully and move on to successful jobs simply because they were able to build a relationship with someone that they knew believed in them and have a positive interaction for the first time with school. That is a serious, paramount piece of information and importance for me, and it is something I believe in so strongly that it will be a focus of my first year as a principal. Finally, my reflection. This exercise was a capstone of what has been an extremely beneficial course. In forming this presentation, I took a deep look at a school that I have walked into for the first time last week. I see its strengths and its difficulties, and I see what's being accomplished and where its plans and hopes lie for the future. Additionally, the ability to examine with a critical eye while maintaining a positive approach is crucial to my success as administrator. The lessons learned in this presentation and the course are of utmost importance to my future as an administrator. And I really kind of mean what I said here, because as someone with 20 plus years of experience and having been a principal and program director at a residential facility, I have a lot of confidence with a lot of the information that has been conveyed in several of the classes. If you have a pretty fair amount of experience, a lot of that information is something that you almost take for granted at this point. This course was different, though. Evaluating teachers, being that active supervisor, maintaining professional relationships where they used to be personal. These are things that I needed to hear, needed to learn, and needed to wrap my head around. And this course was really beneficial in giving me those. So thank you for your time. I appreciate your patience. And that's my presentation. Good night.